What's up, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. It's time for another recap of what went down on this week's episode of Kail's Baby Mama's No Dramas podcast. As usual, she's out here calling Chris a narcissist. Oh my God, when does she get tired, y'all? Anyway, if you're gonna be listening to it yourself, FYI, the first 20 minutes, they're either talking about dogs or doing advertisements, so definitely skip through that if those are things that you're not interested in. And then after they get past that, they talk about how their kids have now been ordered to go back to virtual school. And then she makes a claim that can actually very easily be debunked by simply going back and rewatching an old episode of Teen Mom 2. Someone writes into the podcast saying, oh my God, like my stepson's like mom is always asking us to watch him so that she can go out and party with her friends or do whatever with her friends instead of watching him for the weekend or whatever. And then Kail claims that she has never asked any of her baby daddies, Joe, Javi, or Chris, to keep her kid so that she can go partying or do something else that like is not like absolutely mandatory. She says that she's only done that when she was in college because she wanted to, of course, like study and graduate and everything. That's the only time she's ever asked them to watch their kids extra, but it's simply not true. Because if you recall, when Kail was going through her divorce, separation from Javi, she was already dating Chris Lopez. So there was an episode of Teen Mom 2 where Isaac is having a really hard time with the divorce separation, and so he's crying at home. Mind you, her mistress Chris was already in the house at this time, and so instead of comforting her crying child, she calls Joe to pick him up. So Joe comes over to pick up Isaac, and who is there in the driveway by Kail's car? Her mistress, Chris. So this is a good example of her remembering her parenting one way, but you know, the receipts show it another way. Sure, she didn't ask Joe to watch Isaac while she goes partying or anything like that, but the thing is, she asked Joe to take Isaac so that she could stay at home with her jump off. And that's pretty much the same thing, maybe even worse, because this is your mistress at the end of the day, right? And this is where we get into her talking about Chris Lopez being a narcissist and her co-parenting with a narcissist. Sure, she doesn't name him by name, but she has posted on her Instagram before when Chris gave their son Lux like a hair trim or whatever, that he was a narcissist to co-parent with. She says on the podcast that she learned about narcissistic co-parenting or whatever it was through TikTok, and then she would apply that to at least one of her baby daddies. And so, you know, when you kind of look back at the receipts, it's pretty obvious that she is talking about Chris Lopez. And then the subject then turns into, sometimes parents are calling their kids too much when they're at their other parent's house, and it kind of feels like they're encroaching on their territory, or like, you know what I mean? Like stepping into someone else's time. And so she says she doesn't do that when it comes to her kids. She only really calls to like say goodnight to them when they're at their dad's houses. And speaking of phone calls, V says that her husband, who is Kail's first baby daddy, Joe, sometimes complains about Kail kind of ignoring his texts or his calls. V's like, you know, sometimes Joe says that like he knows you're on the phone, but you're not responding a message or like picking up a call or whatever. And then Kail claims that it's just not the case. Like she's busy with all the kids she's got running around. Then she's got all these social media businesses that she's doing. And so she always tries to get back to him quickly. But then she also mentions how Isaac has his own cell phone. And then, you know, that was the complaint that V was talking about. Joe's like, oh, I miss Isaac, I want to talk to him. But Kail's like, Isaac's got his own cell phone. So then I do kind of wonder, well, why is Joe trying to call Kail to reach his son when his son has a cell phone and he's got his son's cell phone number? I don't know if he feels like maybe it's more respectful to go through Kail for like a full-blown phone call so that, you know, he's not just like on the phone for, I don't know, 30 minutes or something with Isaac when Kail is talking to him or doing something with him. I don't know, but that was something that was kind of thrown out there. And I'm kind of curious about you guys on this one. So her 7-year-old son, Lincoln, also has a cell phone. I'm assuming it's a smartphone because she talked about how she got an upgraded phone and then it came with like a couple of new phones for free as part of like a family plan. And I got a little bit nervous about the idea of a 7-year-old with a smartphone. It makes me nervous because I have a nephew who's 5. He's going to be turning 6 in April. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't picture him with a smartphone. Like, what? It's so crazy how young this happens these days. But they do talk about like how there are all sorts of parental locks and stuff like that, which makes me feel a lot easier about it. It means that the kids aren't going to be like randomly like, I don't know, on like chat rooms with like who knows who, you know, like searching YouTube, finding all these crazy things about themselves. I think the fact that they're public figures also makes it so much more scary for me about what it is they're going to read about themselves, their parents eventually. Imagine getting the tea on your parents from, I don't know, a YouTube video, I don't know, like a Facebook group, something, you know what I mean? Like, it's, to me, it's so scary. I don't know how these girls are gonna deal with that when their kids get to that age. I think Isaac at least is at that age where he can kind of start, you know, kind of secretly looking at like blogs and stuff online and seeing what the tea is about his parents, if that's something that he's into. You know, like maybe someone mentioned something to him at school because they're doing it to tease him or something, and then like he looks, I don't know, but it makes me so scared, especially someone as young as 7 years old having that kind of access. But you know, on the topic of having all kinds of parental control, V talks about how her daughter's tablet doesn't let her watch videos until she reads at least 15 minutes worth of content, and then it doesn't work until after school. Like she can't just get on her tablet in the morning, and then she says it's only for about 1 hour a day as well. So I'm like, okay, hopefully the cell phone's kind of locked up to where it's like you can only text me, your dad, your grandparents, and that's about it on Lincoln's side. And the podcast ends with Kail talking about her having her kids embrace their Hispanic heritage. She goes, Lincoln is in Spanish immersion. We would have put Isaac in it, but like, you know, it was too late by the time we figured we wanted to do something like that, so he's not. And she says, listen, I really want all of my kids to speak Spanish. Like, I'm really proud of the fact that they have Hispanic roots. And when Isaac was a baby, I used to beg his grandparents, Eddie and Janet, to speak in Spanish to him, but they never would do it, and I never would understand why. So like, I'm quite sad that he's not able to go into like the immersion program or anything like that. Then when it comes to Lincoln, she was upset that Javi would never speak to Lincoln in Spanish either. She was like, I always wanted him to speak to him in Spanish. And then when I asked him why he's not doing it, his excuse was, oh, I was going through so much with the separation and this and that. And I guess, I don't know, like if you mainly think in like one language, it is kind of hard to like speak in another to someone who doesn't understand that. Like you can only really speak in your second language with native speakers of that second language. So it is quite hard to teach it to someone else. You know what I mean? So I totally get where Javi's coming from on that perspective, especially when you got all the stress and stuff mounting on top of you as well. But now that things are settled, maybe he is able to speak to Lincoln in Spanish now. I don't know. It seems like he does, at least a little bit, based on his own Instagram stories. I know Spanish is the first language that he learned, but it's not his dominant language anymore, just based on like, you know, like his work in the army, like living in Delaware, like being married to an English speaker. Like he probably does most of his stuff during the day in English, that speaks to his own family in Spanish, and that's not the majority of his day anymore. And then it happens with V as well. She's like, you know, she knows Spanish fluently, but she's just not, it's not like an instinct for her to speak in Spanish, and that's why she's not really speaking to her daughter in Spanish. She's leaning on like, you know, her stepdad and other people in her community to speak to her daughter in Spanish, and then she is going to be going to a Spanish immersion school as well when she's ready. Anyway, you guys, that does it. Another recap of what went down on this week's episode of Kail's Baby Mamas No Dramas podcast. But as usual, I'm more excited to hear what you have to say about everything. So please make sure to let me know all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, and we'll chat. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.